All right, everybody, let's get to it and pull that tarp. My guest today, Shayna Bergman. Shayna is a certified executive and leadership coach. She is an expert on helping parents in leadership and executive roles reach their full potential. And let me tell you, she's got a lot of experience doing it. 20 years of experience helping high potential leaders and executives grow their career. She has also served as an adjunct faculty at NYU and the George Washington University. She also has her own coaching business, which we'll get into. Shayna, welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp.
Thank you so much for having me.
Shayna, this is a great pleasure. Where I want to start, we talk with so many great leaders and high performers on this show every single week, but one of the through lines through all the conversations is that leadership is always evolving. And when we think about modern leadership, what do you think the biggest challenge or challenges that modern leaders face today?
Such a good question. So honestly, the world is changing so quickly that it used to be you could set a goal and you would aim towards that goal, and you could be aiming towards that goal for many, many, many years. But I think now the world is changing so quickly that if you do that, you're going to be a dinosaur by the time you get to it. So I think it is so critical for leaders to really constantly be revisiting where is that point on the map that they're aiming towards, because it should be shifting, it should be evolving, it should be moving. And I think if they don't do that, they're really going to be, at a detriment, especially when they've got teams that are following them as well.
So Shayna, what are some simple things that people can do to do just what you described there? How do you get started doing that?
Yeah. So this is one of those things where it can be quite a process of really figuring out what is it that you really want to get? Where are your dreams? Where are your goals? Why are they important to you? And how do they align, honestly, with your values and what it is that you want out of your life, out of your career? And so I think a lot of it is constantly being able to check in with yourself and say, like, am I still on the right path? Is this still where I want to be going? And if it's not being afraid to change course. And I think that's where people get hung up, is feeling like maybe they've invested so much time or so much money and they keep going down the same path, but that's not the path that makes sense anymore. And so it's having the courage and the bravery to sort of step back, smell the roses, and redirect if needed.
Shayna, I'm curious. One of the things that is also consistently talked about with in conversations that I have with people is the fact that success is often kind of like behind these barriers. Sometimes just being consistent and sticking with something long enough is the difference between success and not achieving success, or fulfillment and not being fulfilled. How do you strike that right balance between sticking with something long enough that you can achieve your full potential versus saying it's time to move on?
Yeah. So the first thing is I would ask somebody, what is success? Because we have this vision, I think, in our minds that society has created about what success looks like. And I think a lot of people think that that's what they want. And when you really peel back the onion, that's not always what it is that they want. It's what they've been taught to believe that they want. And so because of that, I think some of it is, yeah, sticking with it and making sure that you feel like you've given it a go, but not holding yourself stuck in a situation where you know deep in your being that this isn't right. And I think that can take time to uncover. And I agree. I think it's important to stay the course to a certain point. But I think that's where that sort of checking back in with yourself and sort of saying, like, is my gut in this? Am I feeling it? Does this really align with the things that I care most about in life? And I think we don't do that a lot. We're so busy, especially leaders, right? You're leading teams, you're leading companies, you're potentially, you've got a family, and you're constantly pulled in so many directions that it's really hard naturally to step back and say, like, does this make sense? Should I keep going and stick with it and see what happens, or do I wait? And so I think it's that sort of that stepping back that's really critical.
How do you reconcile the fact that something might have been fulfilling and meaningful and effective for you at a certain time, maybe in your life or in your career, and now it maybe not, or not as much? How do you start reconciling and trying to think through that?
Yeah, so I can relate to this one on a very personal level. And so for me, I think about my career, right? I think about the path that I was going down was great. I loved the path I was going down. Everything fit perfectly. But I knew deep down in my gut there was something more for me. I knew that. And I didn't know how to get to it, and I didn't know when the timing was going to be, but I knew that I wasn't completely aligned with where I needed to be. And so for me, it took really asking myself some hard questions and saying, yes, that all made sense up until this point. And I have a choice every day. I wake up every day with choice. I get to decide what to do with my life. And I decided one day, like, I'm going to make a different choice today. I want to do something different. I'm going to try to go in a different direction and I'm going to see what happens. And so I think it's recognizing that that is normal. That happens for people. And that when things made sense for many, many years, people change, life changes. And I think if you don't change with it, you're going to be left behind and you don't want to look back. And I didn't want to look back and say, I could have, I should have, I wish I had done that thing. And so I would encourage people to sort of think about like, you've got life in front of you. You've got time on your side as much as you might not realize it. You got to look back and say, like, am I going to regret something? And if the answer is yes, then change course.
I think that's just such an important message, Shayna. And I've had so much fun watching you evolve your career. And you obviously have dabbled in so many different things, and you've been so passionate about professional development and personal development throughout your career. You worked for one of the largest companies in the world, and now you have your own coaching business where you're really bringing together all of these different things that you've learned. It's so neat. And part of that coaching business, I know you have this mantra: more success, less stress. And I want to get into that a little bit because we just talked about success and how everybody really should define success their own way. How do we get on a path to achieving more success, however we define it, but doing it with less stress? Because I think a lot of people listening can relate to that right now.
Yes. So this is obviously different for everybody. Everybody's journey is very different. And so what I like to do when I partner with people is really clarify with them, what is it that they want? What are those dreams that they have? And it starts there. It really starts with figuring out what is it that you want and where are you today? And I think about it like on a map. You know, where are your feet today? Where do you want to go? And how do we together design what that journey looks like to get there? And so a lot of that is clarifying the vision, clarifying the goals, peeling back what are the values that somebody has, and how can we ensure that the goal that they think they're aiming towards actually matches up. And honestly, Andrew, with that component, that is such a big one because a lot of people think that they know what they want. They think that they want the promotion. They think that they want the big house, whatever it might be. But that's never the goal. The goal is never the thing. The goal is the feeling that they're looking for. So if you think about somebody who wants to get promoted, it's not the promotion as much as people think that. It's the feeling of recognition. It's the feeling of accomplishment. It's the feeling of having other people below them that are following them. It's wanting to be a leader. And so when you peel back, what is it that that goal gives people? There actually end up being a lot of different ways to get to that. And so I like to work with people and basically say to them, look, I know you see a couple doors that maybe seem like they're closing. I'm going to show you some windows over here that you didn't even consider that are going to get you the same thing that you wanted. And look, maybe the goal is right, and that's exactly right. But we check assumptions. We check what are the limiting beliefs that people have. What are the stories that we are telling ourselves that we think are truth that are actually holding us back in our lives? And believe me, we all have them. What are the boulders that we're putting in the way that are preventing us from getting where we want to go and keeping us stuck? And so I believe that when you're looking at more success and less stress, it's really peeling back the onion and going on a journey, which by the way takes time, right? It's not like a quick fix, like here's the silver bullet and it's all fixed, but it's figuring out what do you really want. And again, especially for leaders who are parents, we are juggling so many things. And that's normal. I mean, I recognize that I'm in it myself. And so it's really testing those assumptions about what is it that we think we want? Is that really what we want? And when you do that, the stress level, believe it or not, starts to naturally go down because you start to realize that the things that seemed so big and so dramatic, a lot of times aren't, and they're based in fear. And so we have to kind of uncover what that is a little bit to really get at the heart of what somebody wants, where they want to spend their time during the day, what is really important to them. And when you sort of start to pull that back and you realize, what do I want to be saying yes to? And where can I be saying no with confidence and kindness? What unfolds from that is having this feeling of, wait, I actually can get to what it is that I want. And I probably have a lot of it right now and don't even realize it. And then that stress level starts to go down.
It's so interesting, how you described there. I mean, so much of the stress can be alleviated by perspective and, kind of restacking maybe what you had historically thought were your priorities or what you were afraid of or what the issues were. One of the things that I hear from young leaders and leaders who are parents, and Shayna, I know you work with leaders of all types, but that's something that you you spend a lot of time focused on, is how to just juggle different professional and personal priorities. And one of the things that I really struggle with, and I'm very transparent about this with people, is that I struggle switching between tasks, context switching, whatever you want to call it. And I have always found that, I think earlier in my career, when I was transitioning to being a parent, I tried to put more strict kind of boundaries, right? Because I knew that, hey, this is my work time, this is my personal time, and it's hard for me to kind of go back and forth. Well, over time, and probably accelerated by the pandemic and the virtual hybrid stuff, that context switching became really important to being productive. And I'm curious, I mean, what advice do you give people to be where your feet are, but also transition well to the other areas and disciplines of your life?
Yeah, I hear this all the time from my leaders that I work with constantly. It's that switching hats and how much of a toll that can take. It's exhausting. And I think you're right. I think a lot of it is boundary setting, but that can be very hard for people. And I think that's one of those great examples where we put up excuses, all the reasons why we can't do those things. But if you operate from a place of, I can't do that, and I'm giving away the control that I have over my life, it's going to continue to be really, really hard. And I think it looks different for different people, right? There are some people that really thrive in the chaos. They like that. They like running from soccer practice to a board meeting while they're on the phone and helping their kid with homework. And that gives them adrenaline and a sense of purpose. And then there are other people where that is very challenging and it's very, very taxing. And so I think it's really looking at the individual person and figuring out with them what feels right for them. And when you get to what feels right, then it's really helping them find permission within themselves to operate in that way. And honestly, I think a lot of it is sort of needing that permission that people feel. They feel like they need somebody to tell them, it's okay if you go to the soccer practice and put your phone down for a little bit. But the truth is, nobody's going to give that to you. And so if you're in an environment where you feel like you really don't have that, but that is important, then you got to change what you're doing, right? This is where you can't sit back and say, this is just my life. Because yeah, it might be just your life, but you do still have control. You do have the power of choice.
So what are some things, because sometimes people will say that the ability to choose, you come from a place of privilege, right? As a leader, if you have the ability to say what you can do and say what you can't do, and I don't want to take that on, and I need to take, not everybody in an organization feels like they have the ability and maybe privilege, if you want to use that word, to do that. So if you're in a situation where you feel like the boundaries are bleeding and you don't have that, no one's saying it, and you don't feel good about it, but you don't want to leave what you're doing. You want to make the situation where you are better. How do you start that conversation with a colleague, another leader, somebody on your team? How do you start that conversation and moving the ball in the right direction for you?
So I believe it's really important to have table pounders. Everybody's got to have table pounders. They've got to have somebody or multiple people in their corner who are there for these types of moments to help those kinds of conversations break through and to help somebody feel the comfort and the bravery to talk about what it is that they need. And honestly, especially now, especially in the environment that we're in, it is an employee's market, right? They have an opportunity to ask for what it is that they want and to be bold and to be brave in those decisions. And right now, employers are listening. And so, yes, I think that there are definitely people where that comes a lot easier depending on the privilege that they have, and it's a lot harder for others. But if you keep all of those desires in your head, it's not going to happen. You have to talk about it. You have to talk about what you want. You have to talk about it with your team, with your colleagues, and you have to really live it. And sometimes I would even say to somebody, what's the worst that could happen? If you put your phone down and you walked out the door and you did the thing you had to do and you picked it up again, what is the worst that could happen? And sometimes even when you play that game, you realize, well, it might be maybe not that bad. Or somebody actually is surprised and they get a pat on the back for great job for putting that away. Great job for walking away. Now you're coming back more refreshed. And so sometimes it's taking like little mini brave micro steps that allow somebody to sort of try something out and see if it ended up being as bad as it was in their head. And I think that's where we get in our own way a lot, is we just think like, oh, I could never say that. I could never do that. That's not in me. That's not who I am. Well, make it who you are. Try it. What's the worst that could happen?
Little brave mini steps. That's such an important message. Shayna, let's talk about another little brave mini step. And I think that's being vulnerable. That's one of the other just consistent through lines throughout all the conversations that I have with people who perform at a high level in any industry, any walk of life. The ability to be vulnerable, admit fault, open up the aperture of their life so that you can see in a little bit more closely into their personal life, whatever it is. I have found, especially over the last couple of years, the more that I could introduce the people that I work with, my clients, my colleagues, to my family, to my personal passions, the more, just sitting here in this room with books and pictures and different things behind me, how much that has accelerated conversations. What do you tell people about vulnerability? What's the right amount? What's not the right amount? How do you open up enough but not too much? What's the story on that?
So I very much believe in vulnerability. And I'll tell you, even when I had a team under me, my team always knew what was going on with me. They knew what was happening in my life. They knew when I was having a good day. They knew when I was having a slightly off day, because I wanted them to see me as human, and I didn't want them to see me as infallible in some way. And I would even let them know, hey guys, there's this thing that we're going to all be doing. We have to do it. Here's why. Here's my take on it. I wasn't somebody that pretended like everything was great all the time, because that's not normal. And I think that creates a space where people feel that they can't be honest. And so I always took the approach of being very direct, very honest, still leading, still seeing the hope and the light at the end of the tunnel, but also bringing them into where I had some concerns. And so it allowed my team to also bring forth where they had concerns. It allowed for a very raw and vulnerable and safe space. And I see with leaders a lot this feeling like they have to put up a wall, and that there's this separation they have to maintain in order to be a leader. And I think that's false. I think that creates an environment where people feel unsafe speaking up, where they don't feel that they can bring their full selves to the table, and people are not stupid. They can read somebody. They know when you're holding back. They know when they don't have insight into something going on. And it's in the moments when somebody says, hey guys, I've got a sick kid today, so I'm juggling a lot. I've got a lot going on. I just want to let you guys know, because it gives the permission to the next person who's dealing with the same thing to not have to put on a brave face and put themselves in an uncomfortable situation, and be able to say, well, I saw my leader do this, so I think it's okay. They're paving the path that I can bring my full self to work too. And it creates, I think, a dynamic of a team that is unbelievably high performing because of that trust that they've created due to how their leader operates.
In addition to that trust, Shayna, do you think that there's just this power that breeds itself where you want to pull for each other? Like when you just feel like people at a more personal human level?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And so I'll tell you, I created, when I had a team, I created with them something that I called Today Me, Tomorrow You. And the concept was just that. It was that there are going to be times when I got to get out of here because I've got to go handle something unexpected, and I need you to cover for me. And I want you to feel that you have the same thing. And it didn't matter that I was the one leading, right? We all had this concept of today me, tomorrow you. One day I'm going to need help and you're going to step in. And one day you're going to need help and I'm going to step in. And so, especially when I work with leaders where they feel that need to always be perfect, that's not normal, right? Nobody operates in that way. And when you do that, you don't allow for other people to step in and shine. And honestly, these high performing teams, everybody on there has something to give. And sometimes it just takes sort of the right breakthrough with somebody to allow everybody to feel that ability to jump in as needed, to help where they need. And sometimes it's just those little things that goes a really, really long way. And so I think it's important for leaders to recognize that when they open up a little bit and they create that space for people to step into their power, step into the performance potential that they have, that they start to see everybody is going to be pulling at different times as needed and helping the team be better.
You walked right into, Shayna, the everybody pulls the tarp mindset. I know you are a tarp puller, and you believe in these principles that we talk about on the show every day. I think so much of success of any high performing team is built around people who are willing to go above and beyond, people who are willing to fill the gaps. They see opportunities, they plug them. And the more I think about it and the more I study this, the more I think it comes back down to each individual being vulnerable and being open to making mistakes and being willing to take risks, and this shared understanding that we're all going to pick each other up. And I'm curious, as you think about how you pick one another up, how you share responsibility, how do you go forward in a way as a team, as a group, where somebody who's performing at a really high level or putting in a lot of work doesn't feel like they're getting taken advantage of? How do you reconcile that? There's a lot to do, but we also don't want people to feel like they're being taken advantage of.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think there is power in having that conversation and constantly checking in so somebody isn't feeling that way. But I'll also say, I think that there are growth opportunities that sometimes happen in those little minute opportunities that might exist. The things that maybe seem, I'm going to say, beneath somebody, that it's in those moments when the right person sees what you're doing and says, gosh, that person did something really special. That person did something that was not necessarily part of their job, but I can see that they care. And I can see the impact that that little thing has. But I also think on the flip side, I think it takes a leader that lets people jump into those things and allows them and gives them space to try new things, to step out of their comfort zone, to do some of the little things just to kind of see what happens. But I think there's that component of checking in and making sure that there isn't that taking advantage, which sometimes that happens, right? And I think that's where you got to be empathetic. You got to be an empathetic leader. You've got to make sure that you know what's happening with your team. And you got to have people on the team that are going to speak up and say, "Hey, I know you asked that guy to do that thing. He's really pulled tight right now. Let me jump in. Let me step in and help with whatever it is that we need." But it's that constant conversation, that constant communication to really be aware, I think, and mindful of what's actually happening and not being so head in the clouds that you've lost the perspective of what's actually happening with people on the ground.
I think that's so important, Shayna, and something that we can all learn from. I am a huge believer that if the leader doesn't show if the leader doesn't show their ability and interest in taking risks and making mistakes, that why would anyone else feel comfortable, stepping out and doing things maybe that are outside the boundaries of what they're used to doing or what they feel like they're expected to do, or put themselves in a position where they might fail, quote unquote, or they might not succeed as much as they had hoped. I'm so curious. We encourage people to take risks. We create these platforms for risk taking and stepping out of your comfort zone. How do we manage failure? How do we pick ourselves back up and move forward?
I love failure. I love failure because here's what happens. You either succeed or you learn. There's no failing. You either succeed or you learn. And a lot of it is perspective. So if something doesn't go how you expected it, big, little, somewhere in between, it's really what do you do with it? So if you're going to let it knock you down, then there's not going to be any opportunity to grow. There's going to be no pulling yourself back up. And I think about it like if you think about a little kid who's learning how to walk, they don't fall down and then say, like, I guess I shouldn't be doing this walking thing. I guess this isn't for me. Right? They get up and they walk again and they try to figure it out and they keep falling until they figure it out. And so for me, and especially I see this with leaders all the time who are so afraid of taking a big jump or a little jump because they're afraid of what's going to happen on the other side. But if you don't take risks and if you don't go into it with figuring out if I fail, how can I grow, then you will be stuck where you are. And that's not fun. And that's not living your life. And that's not seeing what the potential is that you or your team have. And so I think it's really trying to embrace if something were to happen and when something happens, what did I learn from it? How can I have perspective? And I'm not saying that we don't get upset. Of course, you have your moments. You get mad about it. You're angry. You're frustrated. But what do you do with it then? How do you turn it into a learning opportunity so that you can pivot and do it again?
I think the learning opportunity thing is such an important piece. I mean, whether it's an Olympic figure skater, professional basketball player, a best-selling author, a CEO, what I always hear is people don't often see our failures. They see us landing that jump on the ice in the Olympics. They see that 3.5 minute song that ran up the charts. They see the 17th book that we've written, but the first that became a bestseller. Nobody knows about the other 16. And if people give themselves a moment to appreciate the fact that everybody who achieves anything has failed along the way, and they've used it. It's really just comes down to, like you said, how do you use the failure? How do you use it? Do you use it as a stepping stone, or do you use it as something that forces you to give up? How do you like get to a place where you can be really comfortable failing? Because and the example you provide there is great. I can visualize like teaching a kid to walk. How do you just continue to get more and more comfortable?
So I think there's a couple different things that have to happen. But the first is, I would say it's really important to have, again, I go back to the table pounders. It's important to have people around you who are telling you, you've got this. Yes, that has to come internally too. But it helps to have people to say, keep going, keep going. We believe in you. We believe in what it is that you're doing. And have those people that are going to pick you back up again and say, keep going, you've got this. But I think there's the internal component too. And that is, if you're failing, that means that you are trying to do something that's big. That means you're trying to do something that's important and that you believe in it. And so if you believe in what it is that you're going after, if you believe that it's achievable, and if you believe that you can get there, that's all that matters. Whatever happens in between is part of the growth and the learning opportunity. And I love what you said about the fact that, especially with successful people, you don't see all the misses. Everybody has misses. That is human. That is part of our human experience, is having that. And the world is very curated right now, right? We're only seeing the glamorous side of it, but everybody has this unglamorous side that they're going through. And honestly, I really like when I see a leader who shows that to their people and says, like, I went big for this thing and it didn't work. And I want to talk about what I learned from it. And I want you guys to feel comfortable taking risks, because it's in those moments where there is magic that happens, because that's where you get out of this safe zone. In the safe zone, there's no fun there. There's no growth there. It's getting beyond the comfort zone where the real journey begins.
Shayna, you mentioned going big. Nobody's going bigger than you right now. You jump out of a steady, one of the largest companies in the world, where you were doing a lot of great work, to starting Shayna Bergman Coaching. Now you're out on your own. You're helping other people live these principles, and you're doing it your way, on your terms. And I'm curious, I want to talk about your story a little bit for the next couple of minutes before we wrap up. I'm curious, how did you initially get into this world of supporting, developing leaders? I know it's been something that you've been passionate about for a very, very long time.
I've been passionate about it for longer than anybody probably realizes. And I'll tell you when it started. When I was 3 years old, I used to go on car trips with my parents, and my parents are both entrepreneurs. And I would want to be listening to Rafi, like the children's artist who would sing children's songs. But
Baby Beluga.
Baby Beluga, that's right. But my parents would be listening to Tony Robbins. And so I grew up on very long car trips listening to Tony Robbins from the age of 3 years old. And believe it or not, even at that age and through the years, as they continued to listen to him and I continued to hear it and hear conversation around the dinner table, I started to understand that there is power that people have. There are inner strengths that people have that they never express. They're afraid. They're trying to play it safe. They put up all the reasons why they can't. And it really made me think about, like, how can I help people live their best lives? How can I help them feel the achievement that they want to feel? Because I believe people have this strength within them too. And so from a very early age, I went on this pursuit of, like, initially it was trying to, how do I help people at work feel better? How do I make sure that they feel that they have meaning in the job that they're doing, that they feel connected to their employer? And so I went the human resources route, which got me close to that. And then it was really sort of like, okay, how can I now sort of transition that into where my passion is, which is having that one-on-one deep connection to allow somebody the space to explore what those strengths are, because people don't have that space. They don't have the time to do that. And so I knew coaching was the answer to that. But I also said to myself, well, I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to stay on the path. I'm going to check all the boxes. I'm going to go get all the degrees. I'm going to stay in this zone where I've got a regular, constant paycheck and all the things that come with that. And yet I knew that it wasn't really what it was that I wanted to be doing at the end of the day. And so for me, I had to really step back. I had to give myself that space to say, what is it that I want? And what does it look like if I were to jump? And I had to find the people around me that were going to support me. That was in my friends and my family, and saying, like, guys, I think I'm going to do this thing. And everybody said, go for it. This is what you're good at. This is what you've always wanted. And it sort of like reminded me of where my heart really was. And I could feel it in my body. Like, this is what I love to do. And so when I went back to school for this to get my executive and leadership coaching degree, my certification, it was like once I dipped my toe back in, I knew that this was my space. And as I worked with people and I saw these insane breakthroughs they were having that they wouldn't have had without the conversations and the dialogues that we were having, I was like, this is my space. I know that this is what I'm meant to do. I see what's happening. And I went back to those days as me being 3 years old in the car, knowing that people had these inner strengths. And now I'm living that and I'm helping them be able to discover them. And I'm watching them try things that they never would have tried before. I'm watching them, like I said, see windows when they thought all the doors were closed. And for me, like there's no greater fulfillment than seeing somebody discover that. And then there's this ripple effect that I believe in, which is that if somebody can find what it is that they really, really love, and they can find fulfillment and they can wake up excited each day, there's an impact that that has on their family. And then there's an impact that that has on their community. And to me, there's an impact that has on the world. And so I'm really in this business of really helping people discover what it is that makes them tick, that is aligned with their purpose, aligned with their values, so that they wake up excited every day and we see that impact happening.
Shayna, I'm getting like chills thinking about you talking about this ripple effect, because I know how passionate you are, and I know the impact that you have on so many, and then the impact that those individuals are going to have on so many. The ripple effect is going to be so powerful as you continue doing this work. And I can't help but smile thinking about 3-year-old Shayna in the car listening to Tony Robbins and sitting there at the dinner table listening to your parents go back and forth about these things. And I think that's an important message for us to end on, is that everybody's watching. Even our 3-year-old kids are watching our every move, and they're listening and they're observing and they're taking in. And as leaders, our colleagues and the people that work with us and around us are watching and listening to our every move. So why not put our best foot forward and bring our best self and pull the tarp? Shayna, this has been so much fun. We're going to have to do part 2, part 3, part 4, and so on. We could talk all day about this stuff. Thank you for being a tarp puller. I know you are. And thank you for starting that ripple effect and keeping it going. And most importantly, thank you for your time. I know you're super busy, and I appreciate you spending a few minutes with me this week.